Hi, everybody, and here we are again, this time in Chapter 9 of The Magician's Nephew. I hope you're enjoying listening to this as much as I'm enjoying reading it to you. It's really been a great story so far, hasn't it? Let me just review with you a little bit about what happened at the end of Chapter 8 to refresh your memory. You remember that Diggory and Polly and Grandfather and the witch and the horse and the cabbie have all come into a dark, strange land with nothing in it, but that they have noticed that there's a lion walking back and forth singing. And as he's singing, things are happening. First of all, we saw that the sky was full of bright stars. And then Uncle Andrew and the witch wanted to go away from this awful country. They hated it there, and they tried to get close to Diggory and Polly so they could get their rings from them. But at the very last of this chapter, Diggory is talking, and he's saying, "You take care. If either of you come within half an inch of us, we two will vanish, and you'll be left here for good. Yes, I have a ring in my pocket. We'll take Polly and me home. And look, my hand is just ready, so keep your distance. I'm sorry about you," he looked at the cabbie, "and about the horse, but I can't help that. As for you two," and he looked at Uncle Andrew and the Queen, "you're both magicians, so you ought to enjoy living together." "Oh, hold your noise, everybody," said the cabbie. "I want to listen to the music." For now, the song had changed. Chapter 9, The Founding of Narnia. The lion was pacing to and fro about that empty land, singing his new song, by which he had called up the stars and the sun, but this song was softer and more lilting, a gentle, rippling music, and as he walked and sang, the valley grew green with grass. It spread out from the lion like a pool. It ran up the little hills like a wave. In a few minutes, it was creeping up the lower slopes of the distant mountains, making that young world every moment softer. The light wind could now be heard ruffling the grass. Soon there were other things besides grass. The higher slopes grew darker with heather. Patches of rougher, more bristling green appeared in the valley. Diggory didn't know what they were until one of them began coming up quite close to him. It was a little spiky thing that threw out dozens of arms and covered those arms with green and grew larger at the rate of about an inch every 2 seconds. There were dozens of these things all around him now, and when they were nearly as tall as himself, he saw what they were. "Trees!" he exclaimed. The nuisance of it was, as Polly said after, you just weren't left in peace to watch it all. Just as Diggory said, "Trees," he had to jump because Uncle Andrew had sidled up to him again and was just going to pick his pocket. It wouldn't have done Uncle Andrew much good if he had succeeded, for he was aiming at the right-hand pocket, where he still thought the green rings were homeward rings. But of course Diggory didn't want to lose either of them. "Stop!" cried the witch. "Stand back, no further back. If anyone goes within 10 paces of either of the children, I'll knock out his brains." She was poising with her hand in that iron bar in her hand that she had torn off the lamppost and was ready to throw it. Somehow nobody doubted that she would be a very good shot. "So," she said, "you would steal back to your own world and leave me here with the boy." Uncle Andrew's temper at last got the better of his fears. "Yes, ma'am, I would," he said. "Most undoubtedly I would. I should be perfectly in my rights. You have shamefully, most abominably treated me. I have done my best to show you such civilities as were within my power, and what has been my reward? You have robbed, I must repeat that word, robbed, a highly respectable jeweler. You have insisted on my entertaining you to an exceedingly expensive, if not to say ostentatious, lunch, though I was obliged to pawn my watch chain and watch in order to do so. And let me tell you, ma'am, that no one in our family has been in the habit of frequenting pawn shops, except my cousin Edward. During that indigestible meal, and I've been feeling worse for it even to this very moment, your behavior and conversation has attracted the most unfavorable attention of everyone present. I feel that I have been publicly disgraced. I shall never be able to show my face in that restaurant again. You have assaulted the police. You have stolen. Oh, stow it, governor, do stow it, said the cabby. Watching and listening's the thing at present, not talking. And there certainly was plenty to watch and listen to. The tree which Diggory had noticed was now a full-grown beech, whose branches swayed gently above his head. They stood on cool green grass sprinkled with daisies and buttercups. A little way off, on the river bank, willows were growing, and on the other side, tangles of flowering currant, lilac, wild rose, and rhododendron closed them in. The horse was tearing up delicious mouthfuls of new grass. All this time the lion's song and his stately prowl to and fro, backward and forward, was going on. What was rather alarming was that each time he came a little nearer. Polly was finding the song more and more interesting because she thought she was beginning to see the connection between the music and the things that were happening. When a line of dark firs sprung up on a ridge about 100 yards away, she felt that they were connected with a series of deep, prolonged notes which the lion had sung a second before. And when he burst into a rapid series of lighter notes, she was not surprised to see primroses suddenly appearing in every direction. Thus, with an unspeakable thrill, she felt quite certain that all the things were coming, as she said, out of the lion's head. When you listened to his song, you heard the things he was making up. When you looked around them, you saw them. This was so exciting that she had no time to be afraid. But Diggory and the cabby couldn't help feeling a little nervous as each turn of the lion's walk brought him a little closer to where they were standing. As for Uncle Andrew, his teeth were chattering and his knees were shaking, but he could not run away. Suddenly the witch stepped boldly out toward the lion. It was coming on, always singing, with a slow, heavy pace. It was only 12 yards away. She raised her arm and flung the iron bar straight at his head. Nobody, least of all Jadis, could have missed at that range. The bar struck the lion fair between the eyes. It glanced off and fell with a thud in the grass. The lion came on. Its walk was neither slower nor faster than before. You couldn't tell whether it even knew it had been hit. Though its soft pads made no noise, you could feel the earth shake beneath its weight. The witch shrieked and ran, and in a few moments she was out of sight among the trees. Uncle Andrew turned to do likewise, tripped over a root, and fell flat on his face in a little brook that was running down to join the river. The children couldn't move. They weren't even sure that they wanted to. The lion paid no attention to them. Its huge mouth was open, but open in song, not a snarl, and it passed by them so close that they could have touched his mane. They were terribly afraid that it would turn and look at them, and yet in some queer way they wished it would. But for all the notice it took of them, they might as well have been invisible and unsmellable. When it had passed them and gone a few steps further, it turned, passed them again, and continued its march eastward. Uncle Andrew, coughing and spluttering, picked himself up. "Now, Diggory," he said, "we've got rid of that woman, and the brute of a lion is gone. Give me your hand and put on your ring at once." "Keep away," said Diggory, backing away from him. Keep clear of him, Polly. Come over here beside me. Now, I warn you, Uncle Andrew, don't come one step nearer or we will just vanish." "You do what you're told this minute, sir," said Uncle Andrew. "You are an extremely disobedient, ill-behaved little boy." "No fear," said Diggory. "We want to stay and see what happens." I thought you wanted to know about the other worlds. Don't tell me that now that you're in it, you don't like it here? Like it? Exclaimed Uncle Andrew. Just look at the state I'm in, and this was my best coat and my best waistcoat, too. He certainly was a dreadful sight by now, for of course, the more dressed up you were to begin with, the worse you look after you've crawled out of a smashed hansom cab and fallen into a muddy brook. I'm not saying, he added, that this is not a most interesting place. If I were a younger man now, perhaps I could get some lively young fellows to come here first. One of those big game hunters. Something might be made of this country. The climate is delightful. I never felt such air. I believe it would have done me good if circumstances had been a little more favorable. If only we had a gun. Guns be blowed, said the cabby. I think I'll go see if I can give Strawberry a rub down. That horse has more common sense than some humans, I could mention. And he walked back to Strawberry and began making the cooing and hissing noises that grooms make to their horses. Do you still think that lion could be killed by a gun? Said Diggory. He didn't mind the iron bar much. With all her faults, said Uncle Andrew, that's a plucky gal, my boy. It was a spirited thing to do. He rubbed his hands and cracked his knuckles, as if he were once more forgetting how the witch frightened him whenever she was really there. It was a wicked thing to do, said Polly. What harm had he ever done her? Hello, what's that? Said Diggory. He had darted forward to examine something only a few yards away. I say, Polly, he called, do come and look. Uncle Andrew came with her, not because he wanted to see, but because he wanted to keep close to the children. There might be a chance of stealing their rings. But when he saw what Diggory was looking at, even he began to take a little interest. It was a perfect little model of a lamppost, about 3 feet high, but lengthening and thickening in proportion as they watched it, in fact, growing just like the trees had grown. It's alive, too. I mean, it's lit, said Diggory. And so it was, though, of course, the brightness of the sun made the little flame in the lantern hard to see unless your shadow fell on it. Remarkable, most remarkable, muttered Uncle Andrew. Even I never dreamed of magic like this. We're in a world where everything, even a lamppost, grows. I wonder what sort of a seed a lamppost grows from. Well, don't you see, said Diggory, this is where the bar fell. The bar, she tore off the lamppost at home. It sank into the ground, and now it's coming up as a young lamppost. But not so very young now. It was as tall as Diggory when he said this. That's it! Stupendous, stupendous, said Uncle Andrew, rubbing his hands harder than ever. Oh, they laughed at my magic. That fool of a sister of mine thinks I'm a lunatic. I wonder what they'll say now. I have discovered a world where everything is bursting with life and growth. Columbus, now they talk about Columbus, but what was America to this? The commercial possibilities of this country are unbounded. Bring a few old bits of scrap iron up here, bury them, and they'll come out as brand new railway engines, battleships, anything you please. They'll cost nothing, and I can sell them at full price back in England. I shall be a millionaire. And then the climate. Talking in a funny voice for Uncle Andrew's making me cough. And then the climate, I feel years younger already. I could run it as a health resort. A good sanatorium here might be worth $20,000 a year. Of course, I shall have to let a few people into the secret, but the first thing is to get that brute shot. You talks just like the witch, said Polly. All you think of is killing things. Then, as one regards oneself, said Uncle Andrew in a happy dream, there's no telling how long I might live if I settled here. And that's a big consideration when a fellow like me has turned 60. I shouldn't be surprised if I never grew a day older in this country. Stupendous, the land of youth. Oh, cried Diggory, the land of youth. Do you think it really is? For of course he remembered what Aunt Letty had said to the lady who brought the grapes. And that sweet hope rushed upon him. Uncle Andrew, he said, do you think there's anything here that would cure Mother? What are you talking about? Said Uncle Andrew. This isn't a chemist's shop, a drugstore. But as I was saying, you don't even care two pennies worth about her, do you? Said Diggory savagely. I thought you might, after all. She is your sister, as well as my mother. Well, no matter. I'm jolly well going to ask the lion himself if he can help me. And he turned and walked briskly away. Polly waited for a moment and then went after him. Here, stop, come back. That boy's gone mad, said Uncle Andrew. He followed the children at a cautious distance, for he didn't want to get too far away from the green rings or too close to the lion. In a few minutes, Diggory came to the edge of the wood, and there he stopped. The lion was singing still, but now the song had once more changed. It was more like what we would call a tune, but it was also far wilder. It made you want to run and jump and climb. It made you want to shout. It made you want to rush at other people and either hug them or fight them. It made Diggory hot and red in the face. It had some effect on Uncle Andrew, for Diggory could hear him saying, A spirited girl, sir. It's a pity about her bad temper, but a fine woman all the same, a jolly fine woman. But what the song did to the two humans was nothing compared with what it was doing to the country. Can you imagine a stretch of grassy land bubbling like water in a pot? For that really is the best description of what was happening. In all directions, it was swelling into lumps. They were of different sizes, some no bigger than molehills, some as big as wheelbarrows. 2 of them were the size of cottages. And the humps moved and swelled till they burst, and the crumbled earth poured out of them. And from each hump there came out an animal. The moles came out, just as you might see a mole come out in England. The dogs came out, barking the moments their heads were free, and struggling as you've seen them do when they're getting through a narrow hole in a hedge. The stags were queerest to watch, for of course their antlers came up a long time before the rest of them. So at first Diggory thought maybe they were trees. The frogs, who all came up near the river, went straight into it with a plopping and a loud croaking. The panthers, leopards, and things of that sort sat down at once to wash the loose earth off their fur, and then stood up against the trees to sharpen their front claws. Showers of birds came out of the trees. Butterflies fluttered. Bees got to work at the flowers as if they hadn't a second to lose. But the greatest moment of all was when the biggest hump broke like a small earthquake, and out came the sloping back, the large wise head, and the 4 baggy-trousered legs of an elephant. And now you could hardly hear the song of the lion. There was so much cawing, cooing, crowing, braying, neighing, baying, barking, lowing, bleating, and trumpeting. Can you see that if I hold it up for you? But though Diggory could no longer hear the lion, he could still see it. It was so big and bright that he couldn't take his eyes off it. The other animals did not seem to be afraid of it. They indeed were at that very moment. Diggory heard the sound of hoofs from behind, and a second later the old cab horse trotted past him and joined the other beasts. The air apparently suited him as well as it suited Uncle Andrew. He no longer looked like the poor old slave he had been in London. He was picking up his feet and holding his head up straight. And now, for the first time, the lion was quite silent. He was going to and fro among the animals, and every now and then he would go up to 2 of them, always 2 at a time, and he would touch his noses with their noses with his. He would touch 2 beavers among all the beavers, 2 leopards among all the leopards, 1 stag and 1 deer among all the deer, and leave the rest. Some sorts of animals he passed over altogether. But the pairs which he had touched instantly left their own kind and followed him. At last he stood still, and all the creatures whom he had touched formed a wide circle around him. The others whom he had not touched began to wander away. Their noises faded gradually into the distance, and the chosen beasts who remained were now utterly silent, with their eyes fixed intently upon the lion. The cat-like ones gave an occasional twitch of their tail, but otherwise all were still. For the first time that day there was complete silence, except for the noise of the running water. Diggory's heart beat wildly. He knew something very solemn was going to be done. He had not forgotten about his mother, but he knew jolly well that even for her he couldn't interrupt a thing like this. The lion, whose eyes never blinked, stared at the animals hard, as if he was going to burn them up with his mere stare. And gradually a change came over them. The smaller ones, the rabbits and the moles and such, grew a good deal larger. The very big ones, you've noticed it most of all with the elephants, grew a little bit smaller. Many animals sat on their hind legs. Most turned their heads to one side, as if trying very hard to understand. The lion opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was breathing out a long, warm breath, and it seemed to sway all the beasts, the way the wind sways a line of trees. Far overhead, from beyond the veil of a blue sky which hid them, the stars sang again, a pure, cold, difficult music. Then there came a swift flash like fire, but burned nobody, either from the sky or from the lion itself. And every drop of blood tingled in the children's bodies, and the deepest, wildest voice they had ever heard was saying, "Narnia, Narnia, Narnia, awake! Love, think, speak. Be walking trees, be talking beasts, be divine waters." Next time, we'll read chapter 10. I hope you'll join me to do that. This is a wonderful story, isn't it? Bye for now, and thank you.